Hey, this is Brian.
Hey there, Brian. It's Rowan from Silver Tiger Media. How you doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. It's tremendous to speak with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you too. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure indeed. Now, Brian, since 1999, just more than 10 years ago, really, you performed with the kit on drums, rhythm guitar, lead guitar, backing vocals, even lead vocals briefly in about 2001. Would that be right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. 8 studio albums later, and obviously great determination to keep producing sensational music, but it was almost over 2 years ago. How close, from your perspective, did it actually come to being the end of 10 years?
Really close. We had come to a bit of a crossroads in the band where we weren't happy, we weren't playing well, and we needed to make a big change in the band. And sometimes those big changes are really difficult, and especially when it comes to people you've spent a lot of time with, and so we had a long-time member that we, unfortunately had to let go of, but in doing so, that also kind of introduced a new rejuvenation and a new sense of strength within the band. So we're stronger now than ever. We're playing better than ever. We're all on the same page, and part of our journey was going through the ups and downs and having some tough times to get to where we're at now, which is much better.
Absolutely. And I don't want to appear to sound like an ad for Mascot, although we love Mascot. Mascot are tremendous people, and we hold them dear to our hearts. But how instrumental was Mascot in revitalising you, or really pushing you towards becoming revitalised and coming out as the strength you are now?
Well, Mascot came to us with an opportunity that was really difficult for the band to pass up because they have such a strong international presence. And since they're a European-based label, since we've become a national touring band in 2005, we've really wanted to make ourselves known in other markets outside of the U.S., but it's a challenging thing to do. So Mascot was a very alluring opportunity because we've seen what they've done with other bands from America in other markets, Australia and Europe and beyond. So that was a big draw to us because I feel like our music has a certain sensibility to it that crosses borders and would really work well in other markets. Without a doubt, and I guess How to Live as Ghosts is the proof of that. You must feel so vindicated in your decision to get back and do it all again. I do. And now that we're all getting along so well and the dynamic is healthy, honestly, it's so much fun. And it's truly like a brotherhood. We can get on each other's nerves once in a while, but honestly, we're playing better than ever, and we're working better than ever together as a group collectively. And so again, it's the journey has there's a lot of turns in the past, but here we are and we're excited and having a blast. Absolutely. And I have to ask you, Brian, I mean this with the greatest of respect and don't mean to ask an intrusive question by any means, but when you took that step backwards from performing live and concentrated on writing, was that about the stage that you knew what had to change? It was just a matter of waiting for the right opportunity. Is there any sort of accuracy in that observation? A little bit, but back then I was playing drums at the time when I decided to leave the road, and I remember sitting back at the drum kit and playing the shows and looking up at the stage, and we use in-ear monitor systems, and I can hear all the guys and what they're playing in my in-ears during the performance, and we just were not playing well. It didn't sound correct. There was a lot of elements that just weren't correct at the time, and it took the joy out of it for me. There was certain things happening on stage that
to me as a perfectionist and kind of, you know, I had a very clear vision of how I wanted everything to be presented live, and it wasn't going that way. So, yeah, I mean, back then I did have an inkling of what I thought could make the band stronger at the time, but I just felt because I was unhappy and I didn't want to, you know, rustle too many feathers. I just felt at that time it was appropriate for me to go home. But once the mascot opportunity came into play and the band decided to take a step forward with it, we knew that a big change was going to have to happen for us to be able to commit to another record. So, you know, once we made the lineup change and everything, we immediately basically started writing the new album, and it came together so organically and quickly. You know, the writing of each song was probably quicker than usual and definitely a group effort this time around. So it was nice.
It sounds like it was enthusiastic too with the timelines. But this is the time that Nick Ruskalinik steps into the equation as well, and everything that man touches just turns to gold. What did his involvement bring for 10 years as a band, and also for yourself personally?
Well, since I produced the last two records, and Jesse and I were the main writers on the last two, it was interesting to bring somebody else into the fold because we're very used to doing things our own way, and we're kind of set in our ways to a certain extent. So at first it took a little bit of adapting, but you know, we also had to consider that if Dave Grohl would trust Nick on multiple Foo Fighters records, and if Alice in Chains and Rush and these huge iconic bands would also put their faith and trust in Nick, then you know, it was probably a good idea for us to try and do the same and just see what would happen. And we did definitely learn a lot from him. And the interesting thing, too, is from our very first meeting with Nick, he had such a clear and concise vision of what our record should be. And by the time we got to the finish line, we miraculously somehow made that record, the record that he, you know, initially thought was appropriate for our band at that time. So for Nick, he wanted us to stop overthinking everything, and he wanted us to make a more stripped down, leaner, more deliberate and vulnerable sounding record. And so a lot of his input on the production as far as keeping it simple, not overthinking it, and not overdoing the production either. Because at the core of who we are, we're a rock band that likes to get in a room and play loud. And you know, he wanted to make sure that came across on record.
Indeed, you certainly achieved that. And I don't want to take away from Minus the Machine particularly, but even from Birth to Burial, it did beautifully represent your emotions, even if those emotions were experiencing some toxicity within the band. They're great records in themselves, but really, did you feel like Nick had taken you out of your comfort zone from a writing, then performing point of view?
We were out of our comfort zone a little because, and I appreciate the kind words about From Birth to Burial. I mean, that album, for myself and for Jesse, is a really emotional album. I mean, that is literally the only record that we were making ever where he and I were in the studio in tears, just like, you know, we basically cried our way through most of that record because, number one, there's a strange, dark feeling and sound to that album. Every song, yes, there's a weird thread that goes through it. And you know, we are also extremely influenced by the feelings of cinema and that cinematic musical approach on, you know, it's sometimes music can be more than just drums, bass, and guitar. And we really tried to push on that particular album soundscapes and emotion. And I'm really proud of it, and I wouldn't take any of that back. I think it was exactly what we needed to make at that moment. But, you know, my mentality with records is that they're just simply snapshots of where you're at a particular time. And so for How to Live as Ghosts, you know, even the title is a play off of From Birth to Burial, because From Birth to Burial signified basically what we thought could be the end of the band. But How to Live as Ghosts, we're the ghosts now rising beyond the death of the last chapter. So everything about How to Live as Ghosts is a little bit more optimistic, I think, compared to From Birth to Burial. This is a new beginning.
Without a doubt, and I love your description of From Birth to Burial. The fact is that overtone of the foreboding just travels through the album beautifully, and that is an important album in the 10 years collection, or the catalogue, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that you were obviously focusing on going out on the road again, and you would be part of performing again, did that affect the writing process at all?
Well, it did, to the extent of Nick didn't want us to layer guitars and vocals too heavily. He wanted it to be basically a very straightforward, believable rock band approach. And so when we constructed the guitar parts, especially for me, and I know Matt did the same thing, is we basically constructed the guitar parts exactly in line with how we would be performing them live. So we didn't want it to be chock full of production and parts that wouldn't be there when we perform live. So the parts that we did write for the record is what you will hear live, as opposed to, there's a lot of bands these days now are running Pro Tools systems, and there's all kinds of tracks going, and there's extras and goodies and things like that. And, not to take anything away from those bands, but that's just not our style. So we constructed parts that we knew we could pull off efficiently live and that it would sound good live. So we did come to the table with writing stuff that we thought would translate really well in a live capacity.
Oh, absolutely. And right from Messenger, I mean, it's a beautiful turn of phrase, the ghost rising from what was close to destruction, but now it kicks the door down and says, I'm back, bitches. It's sensational.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, that song in particular was very fun.
Oh,
I was just saying that song in particular is a very fun song to play, and it's interesting because we had the whole record was completed pretty much, but we ended up Nick came to us one day and said, I think we need one more, and it needs to be a straightforward, like literally beginning of the record type kick in the face, and so we kind of went back to, we went home that night and then pretty much wrote The Messenger that night, and then, went back to the studio the next day and said, I think we've got it. And so that one ended up being the last song that we completed, but the first song on the record.
Oh, beautiful sequencing. It works so well. I must ask you, did you notice whether the technique that you used on this album affected Jesse's vocal technique at all? It almost sounds like you've got, such joy in your hearts when you're performing that you're back together and performing. Did it alter his technique at all?
Well, I can tell you this, especially vocally. See, Jesse, when he writes songs, when he comes up with the lyrics and the vocals, he spends a lot of time crafting those parts, and especially lyrically, he spends a lot of time making sure that the architecture of his lyrics is really cohesive and means, every word means something to him. So that was the one point of contention between us and Nick on the record, was occasionally Nick and Jesse would butt heads a little bit because, Nick would have suggestions for him vocally. And after spending, months writing and crafting these songs, it was difficult for Jesse to try to manipulate any of those parts. But, at the end of the day, they did, we always found a middle ground. And the other thing that Nick did vocally on this record that's different for us is he stripped things down for Jesse so much. We typically do a lot of vocal production and a lot of vocal parts. And, on From Birth to Burial and Minus the Machine, there are several songs where Jesse and I would construct these, 20 vocal track harmony pads and do all kinds of really neat production tricks. And Nick didn't want any of that on this. So a lot of the vocals that you hear, will just be a single track of Jesse singing, and then when it gets to a chorus, I might come in and sing the harmony or double him or something like that. But it was very stripped down, and there's a certain amount of vulnerability that you can hear in Jesse's voice that's not only sincere, but it's kind of, it's a very accurate representation of us performing the song in a very honest state. And that, to me, that's really cool. That's the approach that Nick has used on a lot of his bands. Same thing with Foo Fighters and bands like that, where Nick said, you're a kick-ass rock band, get in there and play, and let's not overdo everything. Let's accurately present this song and not overthink it.
Oh, beautiful. And as you're performing live, does it feel like you're more, I guess for want of a better term, an organic band?
Yes, definitely an organic band. And the other aspect of what Nick does so well with bands is we spent, I would say, about 6 or 7 weeks at his studio working with him, and I would say 3 to 4 of those weeks at the beginning were only pre-production. So what he had us do was just get in a room together, and just play. And we played through the songs over and over and over. We rehearsed them, and he that's when we figured out the final arrangements for all the songs. So he was in the room with us like an extra band member, and he was literally air drumming and air guitaring along and singing, and he was so enthusiastic and motivating. So we spent the majority of the time with him doing pre-production, and by the time all the songs were arranged and we were ready to record them, we only took 2 to 3 weeks to record the whole album because we had been playing the songs so much, we were ready to go.
Absolutely, without doubt. And as you're speaking, I become more enthusiastic. I realise that we're out of time and you have people waiting for you. We have got to sit down and talk about this album more. I could spend a whole day on this. It's sensational stuff. It's an absolute pleasure to catch up with you. And is there any news about maybe a visit to Australia to play this live for us fairly soon?
Well, we're working on getting there in 2018, so that's in the works right now.
Absolutely sensational news, Brian. Thank you for that. That'll uplift a lot of hearts today, I can tell you. Thank you very much for your time today and taking the opportunity to have a chat with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure indeed. Travel safely, my friend, and congratulations again on a sensational album.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.